Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, writers, scientists, educators, social scientists, and government leaders. We meet each one to one. I'm pleased to welcome quintessential New Yorker, by way of Dillon, South Carolina, Suzanne Davis. You may not recognize her name, but you recognize her deeds. Some of them recently made headlines in the New York Times. Suzanne's wonderful and meaningful life needs two programs, but we'll talk fast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Suzanne, since you came to New York right out of college from Atlanta in 1964, you have gone from being a secretary at CBS News to being a unit manager of 60 Minutes. You've been executive director of the Kaplan Fund, a philanthropic organization that supports programs primarily in New York City, and you've headed the U.S. office of J.C.Decaux, the French firm that builds and maintains sidewalk structures. Does your career confirm the theory that New York is a place where a young person can come and have all kinds of great things happen to you? Seems like it.
Absolutely. My basic belief is that timing in life is everything. And when I arrived in New York after graduating college and was looking for this glamour job yet to be defined, since I had no particular goal, and the second day in New York, someone introduced me to Don Hewitt, then the producer of the Cronkite Show, and said, "Don needs a secretary. I'll introduce you to him." And he talked to me and he said, "You can start tomorrow." And there I was sitting behind Walter Cronkite in the evening news, for a couple of years, and then we went on to work on 60 Minutes. So that was just a question of timing.
So how did it evolve from being a secretary for Don Hewitt to working on 60 Minutes? How did that happen?
I also believe that a bright, smart, young, energetic person can get where they want to go with on-the-job training, that you can benefit from being willing to learn. I knew nothing about television or about my next two jobs. And Don was a good person to learn from, since he was one of the geniuses of the medium. And working on the Cronkite Show, I learned the basics of television. Then I was with him when he asked me to type this memo about this crazy idea he had of a 1-hour show that had 3 segments called 60 Minutes, and I worked on him with the pilot, and my organizational skills were good for managing the 60 Minutes unit. I was not a reporter. They didn't make me a reporter. My skills were just being the unit manager.
So what does a unit manager do?
Coordinates the production and works with the different producers and is all of the administrative stuff. But I learned a lot about television. It was very exciting, and of course, when I was at 60 Minutes, it hadn't become what its potential led it to be. And of course, we lost Don Hewitt just this past year when he died, and that was a big loss for the medium. But
so how long were you at CBS?
I was at CBS for 6 years.
Okay.
Until till 1970.
And what made you leave?
Well, personal reasons. I was looking to move on, and then timing again led me to my next job. I had no idea what I was going to do, and I went to 39 employment agencies in 2 weeks. And at the end of a long day, I decided that was it. But I got off on the second floor instead of the first floor, and there was one more agency facing me, so I figured, all right, I'll go in here. And they interviewed me, they saw my references and my background. They said, "Are you interested in New York City?" I said, "Yes, very much." "Would you be interested in working in a foundation?" Well, at that point, a foundation to me was bras and girdles. I knew nothing about a foundation, but they told me about this foundation that supported programs for the city, give away money. It was an administrative job, and so I met them, and I was hired there, and I had the benefit of another exciting mentor, Ray Rubino, who was the ultimate philanthropoid, as he called himself, and he was so busy saving the world that he left it to me to organize the foundation and to set up programs and business-like ways of doing things in a more organized fashion. And after a few years, he retired, and Mr. J.M. Kaplan's oldest daughter, Joan Davidson, moved back to town, and when she became the president of the foundation, then it really took off and really achieved its potential, because Joan is a very focused woman, a passionate woman with great ideas and great leadership, and she became my next mentor, from whom I learned a lot, and we worked together as a great team at the Kaplan Fund.
You had some great mentors, it seemed. You're very lucky in that
absolutely
regard.
so.
So tell me about some of the fund finance some really interesting projects, green markets, the park conservancies. It was very active support of the Coalition for the Homeless. Tell me about those programs.
There were so many wonderful programs at the Kaplan Fund, and their mark is still seen on the city today. And the Green Markets is one of my favorite programs, and I like to remember that that project came in as a not very well written proposal, but a really fabulous idea. And I worked with Barry Benepe and said, you know, you don't need money for a study how to do this. You know how to do this. Why don't we do a pilot program this summer? And we did on 59th Street, and then the same year we opened up the Green Market in Union Square, and eventually now there's 25 or 30 markets around the city. So that was a great signature program. I personally became very interested in the Coalition for the Homeless and programs to help the disadvantaged. In fact, this was back now in the 70s, early 80s, when homelessness was particularly a very visible problem. And I had another great hero who was Robert Hayes, who founded the Coalition for the Homeless. And he and I became great friends. And I asked him, was there some way that we could be more helpful to the coalition other than just giving money? And I had this idea because I had a number of friends in the garment industry that perhaps we could donate clothes to all these poor people who were sleeping on the streets. And he thought that would be very useful. So I asked my friend Larry Phillips, who was the head of Phillips Van Heusen, if it made sense to establish a program by which we could donate merchandise, apparel that was not able to be sold by the manufacturers and the retailers. And he said, absolutely, I'll start you off. And a week later, he had donated 1,000 windbreaker jackets to the Bowery Men's Shelter. And so then I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to figure out a way to maximize this. And through him, I met other industry leaders, and they all agreed that there was almost limitless apparel that was available to be donated if there was a professional mechanism for distribution. So I researched this, and I used the model of the food bank, which was already very successful. And I met Winifred Brown, wonderful woman who was running the Mayor's Voluntary Action Center under Mayor Koch. And she adopted the idea with great enthusiasm, gave us some space. And Mayor Koch, in fact, remains a very enthusiastic supporter even today of the clothing bank. So we founded the New York City Clothing Bank, and the point of the clothing bank is not just another program where you donate used clothes, but in fact it is new merchandise that hasn't been worn, so that when people receive the clothing, it gives them a sense of dignity, a sense of feeling a little bit special when they're looking for a job or going to school. This wasn't just hand-me-downs.
Right. And and where do they get the clothes? Is it at shelters, or is it at?
We're not setting up stands and passing them out one by one. We work with nonprofit agencies that register with us, and we give them clothing that suits the needs of their clientele, for men, women, children, and 5 boroughs. And the clothing bank today, the clothing bank is now 25 years old. It was started in 1986, so it's about to have its silver anniversary. And today they collect about $10 million in merchandise every year from some 300 different manufacturers, local and national, and retailers. And they distribute it to about 250 agencies, serving maybe 80,000 people in a year.
Now, there was a recent brouhaha about a department store here that was found to have been destroying clothes that it could not sell. What did you think about that?
Well, immediately we responded, because when we started this, the whole point was to help the homeless, of course, but to give these manufacturers who told me they would welcome the opportunity to donate their clothes if there was a mechanism for it. So instead of shredding the clothes because they didn't want it to show up being resold on the streets, donate it to us, and we will take the labels out, which we have a bunch of volunteers, former addicts and people who, have had hard times that have worked for us as volunteers, now some prisoners as well, in our warehouse in Brooklyn. They cut out the labels so that they're not resold, and the companies get a tax deduction for making the donation.
So has something been worked out with this particular store as far as you know?
We are working with the store. They certainly have said that they will no longer shred the clothes, and we're trying to get them to affiliate with us in a positive way because we're there to solve their problem and help people.
Right.
My belief is that a lot of people, when they're given an easy way to do something good, want to help. And so this is just one great idea for a program. It solves your problem. You don't have to spend money cutting up the clothes. Right. And obviously it does a lot of good.
The Park Conservancies, I gather, was one program that the Kaplan Fund, I don't know if you started it, but
we were one of the earliest funders for the Central Park Conservancy and the Prospect Park Conservancy, and I helped start the Riverside Park Fund myself. I was living on the west side, but when you get a good idea and you have the resources to help make it happen, that's key.
Right.
And the Kaplan Fund is and was an activist foundation that didn't just believe in writing checks and passing out money, but when we had good ideas, I wasn't moonlighting when I was doing the things that I was doing. I was doing my job, which was helping the city, which is what the Kaplan Fund was for. When I started the coat drive, another example of what the Kaplan Fund could do with their resources. I had the idea 3 years after the clothing bank of collecting used coats. This wasn't really my idea. A woman from Denver had called the mayor's office in New York City saying she had started a coat drive there. Her name was Elizabeth Yanish. We call her the Coat Lady of Denver. And the mayor's office referred her to me because I'd started a clothing bank. And I said, yes, that's a great idea. I met with her, and she told me how they did it there, and I needed manpower because I wasn't going to run this whole operation myself. And I knew about New York Cares, which had only been founded a year earlier, an organization of young working professionals who do volunteer projects. So I approached them, then Kenneth Adams was the director, and they immediately thought this would be a great project. It became a signature project of New York Cares, and we just had our 21st annual coat drive collection. We collected our 1 millionth coat in about 2007.
Wow.
And we collect about 85,000, 90,000 coats every December all over the city. And you may have seen the image of this shivering Statue of Liberty.
Right.
Fabulous icon donated by J. Walter Thompson, did that pro bono for us.
Wow.
So in other words, it was just another simple idea that just made good sense in this case for people to take.
And figuring out some way to execute it.
And that was, that was the legwork that I did, and it was very gratifying.
We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with more with Suzanne Davis, former executive director of the J.M. Kaplan Fund, after the following message.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles. Everybody bring it in. I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out. How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork? I help keep kids in school. Good. And that's the name of the game. My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer.
Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. I'm talking with Suzanne Davis, the former executive director of the J.M. Kaplan Fund, and now full-time volunteer for a host of New York-based philanthropies. So, how'd you go from the Kaplan Fund to working on outdoor toilets?
Well, again, it was because the Kaplan Fund was a creative place to be. Joan Davidson had suggested that I write to the head of the company in Paris that makes the automatic public toilets, because we at the Kaplan Fund had funded a public toilet in Bryant Park, in a restored small building there in the park, and the New York Times wrote, what a great thing to do. But this isn't nearly the answer to the city's problem for needing enough public restrooms. So Joan said, "Now let's track down that company in Paris that makes them." So I wrote to Jean-Francois Decaux, the young head of the company, in February of 1991, "Would you consider bringing your equipment to New York City?" To my amazement, he not only answered my letter, but he said he would come and meet with me. So I assembled a panel of city people in our conference room at the Kaplan Fund for this first meeting. And at that meeting, he agreed that he would do a demonstration of the automatic public toilets in the city so we could see what they would like. If we would raise the connection costs, he would pay for bringing the equipment over. So I raised $250,000 from other foundations, and including, of course, the Kaplan Fund. And he was pretty amazed at that, and got the approvals from the city that we needed just to do the demonstration. And sure enough, we had our first flush on in 1992, in June of 1992, and it was a 3-month experiment.
And there were 4 toilets, weren't there?
There were 3 locations by City Hall and in front of Macy's on 34th Street and up in Harlem on 125th Street. And each location had 2 toilets because they had to be accessible. And at that point, the Decaux toilets were not accessible. They learned a lot about the importance of accessibility by dealing with the United States, and now their toilets in many places are accessible. So we had 2. One was accessible and one was the standard type, and it was hugely successful, and everybody said that they wanted them, including the timing was such, timing again, the Democratic Convention was in town, so mayors of other cities were there, and before we knew it, the mayor of San Francisco, Frank Jordan, had asked if we would come to San Francisco and meet with him and bring public toilets there. Mayor of Seattle, different other cities became interested. So we said sure, and we went to San Francisco. And they were much more proactive than New York City in getting the toilets. And within another couple of years, we had a contract to put newsstands and automatic public toilets and advertising kiosks in San Francisco, the signature kiosks that now you see there. And the program was so successful there that we've subsequently expanded it.
Now, Decaux has had a lot of success in Europe, in other cities in the United States. So why can't we get public toilets in any numbers in New York City?
You know, it's obviously a very frustrating thing for me to think about because we worked for 14 years to try to get a contract here. And after all that time going through so many different iterations of the RFP and the competition for the contract, in the end the city chose another company that had less experience with the automatic public toilets. J.C. Decaux had invented the public toilets. And it was a big disappointment. And if you look on the streets, you will see that there are only, I think, 2 open now. The contract was signed 3 or 4 years ago, and there are only 2 of them, I think. Along the way, the city lost its focus on the toilets, and it became more of a bus shelter contract. And so there wasn't, frankly, enough public outcry to demand more toilets.
I'm surprised because, you know, everybody admits it's a problem, you know, not having these toilets. I remember writing about this issue and the long struggle to bring, you know, public toilets to New York City. And one time I remember, if I remember correctly, a problem in New York, you know, with getting anything public project done. There was something like 22 agencies and nonprofits that got to weigh in on the toilet. And that just sort of, you know,
and unfortunately,
right
people
there.
were saying, not in my backyard, we don't want it here. We really needed more people to be proactive. In San Francisco, you know, it's a different outlook there. There were more activists, and particularly when they educated us about the importance of the accessibility, then they became our friends, and the disabled community became strong advocates because they had not enough accessible toilets. Now they were going to get them. So it's different in each city. Even in Chicago, where we have a beautiful program of newsstands and bus shelters, the mayor did not want public toilets. It was not part of the deal.
What do you consider your biggest professional accomplishment of all the things that you've done?
Well, I think starting the coat drive and starting the clothing bank are the 2, and because they're still so lasting, and they're similar to some other programs I've worked with that we also had a hand in. It was just the concept of doing something that allowed the public to do something good back by making it easy for them to help people who are disadvantaged. So I think having those two concepts is the best. But I also, along the way, learned the importance of volunteering, which is now the mantra of our president, and it's getting a lot more attention. But I wasn't brought up to volunteer, so it wasn't until I came to the Kaplan Fund setting and got involved with these projects and started feeling the importance of giving back that I learned that message, and it's a very important and timely message.
Now, you retired from JC&Co, was it 4.5 years ago?
Yes.
Did you feel you wanted to relax, or did you know immediately that you wanted to dive into other projects?
Well, the day we found out we didn't win the contract, I said, well, I'll be leaving on Friday because there was no need for me to stay. I went home, I hooked up my printer, I bought a roll of stamps, and I was up to speed. I decided I didn't need the mailroom, I could really work from home. And I just had such a rich network of contacts from over the years, working for 40 years. And I have a lot of ideas and I know a lot of people, so I can't seem to resist putting my 2 cents in here or there, suggesting you should meet this person, you should help that way. And so I was invited to go on the board of the Lincoln Square BID. I still continue to collect coats. Lately, I've gotten re-involved with the clothing bank after this recent story in the press. I've gotten involved with the Upper West Side food community food bank, and it's just things that interest me. I can't resist being involved, but I don't want to be in charge of anything. I want to be able to do it at my own leisure and not put any pressure on anymore.
What are some of the projects, new projects that you've got involved with that you think need the most help and guidance?
Well, the newest that I've gotten involved with is this West Side campaign against hunger. Somehow I didn't know about it. It was really in my West Side community up on 86th Street and West End Avenue. And it's a great program where you collect about 60 different buildings on the Upper West Side, ask their residents to collect cans in their building. Again, it's like the coat drive. Bring cans, just leave them at the front desk, let them collect them in the package room, and our volunteers...
Of the church there?
No, collect them in your own building. When you go to the market,
okay,
buy one more can, bring it home and leave it at the front desk. And whenever 2 or 3 bags of food are assembled, our volunteer comes to your building and picks it up and brings it to the church.
Okay.
And the program works so that it's like a pantry. The clients there can shop like they're in a grocery store, and they get points for how much food that they're allowed to take. So it's a great program. Again, it's the easiest of all to buy one more can when you're shopping, bring it home to your building, and be a part of this campaign. So that's the newest thing that's gotten my excitement, it's gotten my interest.
What are some of the, you obviously are a percolator of ideas for the city. What are some of the other gaps that you think need filling?
I think that the more that people can be involved in doing volunteer projects, which is the mayor's theme, I think that's the better, because there's such a need that whatever your personal interest is, whether it's food, whether it's working with children, whether it's volunteering at a museum or a library, I think that the effort to get more people involved, as I say, I learned it late in life, and I think that's the best thing. People should be generous. People should realize that you can afford to buy one more can or give this used coat that you didn't wear before. So I think it's an important message.
And I think when you talk to retired people, they often say that they are busier than they've ever been before.
Absolutely.
That they're practically being run ragged by requests.
I don't know how I ever ran my life when I was working full time, because it's all I can do now to keep all these balls in the air and get dinner on the table.
You've talked about the various acts in your life, and you described the Retirement Act as the best act.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because I have, I'm on my own schedule, and I resist pressure to take on too much responsibility, but I know I can still do good things. And I got married at 60 for the first time, and I'm very happy.
You're an inspiration to women all over New York City.
I know that. I am very lucky.
What's next for you, do you think? Do you have any other things cooking? Well, you
No.
got a lot cooking, actually.
No, I think that just balancing all of this and my personal happy family life. I live right near Lincoln Center, which is a great neighbor to have, and so there's enough to do right in my neighborhood without walking more than 2 or 3 blocks. So I'm quite well occupied.
Well, it's certainly been a fascinating life, and as I said to start, I think it shows young person can come to New York and you can there's so much for you to do.
Absolutely, it's a great city.
We're out of time. I want to thank Suzanne Davis for joining us today. For the City University of New York, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.